friends, my name is Emily and welcome back to my channel. Today I asked on Instagram for some bookish questions. A lot of the stuff for Lumos that was mostly scripted or fully scripted I'm now revisiting. Also, there won't be any Lumos during Pride Month. Yeah, it just doesn't feel appropriate anymore to talk about Harry Potter during Pride Month. I asked you for some bookish questions and you folks delivered. Annie Foss asked, do you annotate all books or only some? If some, how do you know which ones you want to annotate and which ones you don't? And for my favorite annotation supplies. So I do annotate everything. However, during the pandemic, I stopped because I just wanted distraction. It's going to be interesting, like a year from now, looking back at the quarantine reads where I was really stressed trying to distract myself and seeing what I remember about those books, because I suspect it won't be much. How do I choose to annotate a book? If it's a paperback or if it's used, I have no qualms writing in it right away. I will directly engage with the text. I'll circle word choice, how certain phrases go, metaphors, implications, all that jazz. I'll block off entire sections and then I'll attach the sticky note and write my thoughts because usually there aren't enough space in the margins. What I will do if it's a book that I'm not sure about is that I will solely pop the sticky note in above the passage that I'm talking about and then annotate. There's a certain point where I realize whether or not I want to keep the book, and that determines if I just start writing in the book or not. Oh, and favorite things to annotate. I like blue pen in books. I have a whole little pot of blue pens. For a while there I worked in pharmacy, and like if you've ever worked, I'm sure this happens in other places too, but like drug reps would come in all the time and you'd end up with like drug company branded pens. A lot of those pens are what I use. And then the pens that I actually purchase, I favor a pen with a barrel more like the two bottom pens, which is the Poppin, and this is the Staples Postscript 1.0. I have been using these pens for ages. They are my mom's favorite brand of pen ever since I was allowed to use pen in school. It has been these sticky notes. So I prefer the 3x3 inch sticky notes, and then I find that that is too much sticky note, and so I've had people ask me about this before too because they see the sticky notes sitting out. So I take the 3x3 sticky notes, I make sure I've got the flappy end that's not sticky, and I will just cut them in half and stick these little bundles into my books. And I find that this is enough space. Like I write small enough that this is enough space for me. In terms of brand, you have to watch with Post-it notes that they are not too sticky and that they are not sticky at all. I've had a mess with brand name Post-its. I actually don't like brand name Post-it notes. I was running into the problem that when I reread a book, I would peel up the Post-it and it would peel off the ink or the paper, especially of older paperbacks that had a more textured paper. So JD Estrada, writer, asks, what's the messiest food or beverage spill on a book ever? I used to love these glass tea tumblers. I live in Canada, so it's really cold, and one day I had a mix of mint tea leaves and hot chocolate powder in, and it was piping hot into this cold glass, and I put the lid on. I picked it up and I guess it agitated the stuff enough that it exploded. So not only did it explode glass and hot liquid everywhere, there was a cookbook open on the counter, and that was covered in hot chocolate. Long Live the King 19 asks, what are your top 5 Stephen King books of this millennium? I guess the last Dark Tower book has to count. That's probably number 1. On writing, it's been a while since I reread Under the Dome or 11/22/63, but those are probably in the top 5, and then maybe Joyland, maybe The Institute. It's hard to say. Like, I've definitely enjoyed King's earlier works significantly more than his later works, and like have an itch to reread the earlier works more than the later works, if that makes sense. The Dark Tower gets into my top king books of all time, and like nothing else does. Deanna and the Written Words asks, what is your guilty pleasure when it comes to reading? Reading books you know are badly written or shallow, putting books in danger because you want to read in the bathtub or while eating. I think my guilty pleasure is probably young adult fiction. Like, I am very much an adult. And yet I am drawn to a lot of young adult literature. And I think in part it's because that like period of young adulthood has definitely extended for my generation, where like finding a job with your degree is hard, getting into the housing market is hard, and then because you can't find a good paying job and you can't find an affordable place to live, like starting a family is hard. So I feel like even though I am closer to 30 than like 15, where a lot of these characters are set, I feel like my life is very much in that like loose, changing, unsure phase than a 27-year-old would have been in the past. The narrative, the flow of my life is closer to like the uprooted, unrooted, maybe teen life than a lot of the adult literature. And I feel like there's maybe a gap in adult literature that we're starting to see filled out with things like Normal People by Sally Rooney and Tessa Moshfegh's My Year of Rest and Relaxation. Like there is a growing body of literature of like unmoored young adults that isn't part of young adult literature marketed to teens. And like maybe I would feel more at home there. I think the guilty pleasure is young adult literature because it's really not for me, and like sometimes it really doesn't feel like it's for me, but like it's fun. Samantha K. Garner asks, is there a book you were surprised you liked? That's a good question. I feel like I'm more surprised by things that I don't like than the things that I like, because I feel like I have a very good sense of my reading tastes, of what I like in literature, of what like sort of checks my boxes as like a good read. I think it's easier to name books that I picked out because they sounded like something that I would like and didn't like than it is to say that I picked up something that I thought I would hate and I liked it. Ost 1989 asks, if you woke up one morning to find out you were transported into one book universe, which book would it be? It would be a lot of fun to be in one of Tamora Pierce's Tortallin universe books. I think going to the Magical University would be fun. I think being a Queen's Rider would be fun. Where else would be? Oh, it would be super fun to be in the Kingkiller Chronicles, like the Magical University. That would be super rad too. Basically any place that I could go to school. Moon A. Axo asks, with or against book recommendations, as in books form who you are? If I'm with or against receiving recommendations, I think it's always good to receive recommendations, especially from viewers, subscribers, folks who have seen my reading taste and are like, oh, I have this really obscure thing that like I feel like you're gonna like because of what you talked about. Like, really engaged recommendations are great. I guess the other way to read this question is like, do I want recommendations at all, or do I just want to like explore on my own and find the things that really speak to me? And I mean, I do that anyway, but I think it's also really nice to have other people sort of curate things and draw your attention to things, because there's just so much out there. A Book Before Bed asks, your reading ritual? I don't really have one anymore. I read whenever I have time. I carry books with me constantly, so there's really no like ritual or like set time to read, set things that have to happen for me to read. Ficho R asks, new or secondhand books? And the answer to that is both. When I was in university, when money was tighter, secondhand books. Compared to new prices, I think you can find a lot of reasonably priced, affordable secondhand books. Now that I work at a bookstore and I get a discount, oftentimes I find that the discount on a new book is comparable or better to a lot of used books. For now, mostly new books. once I'm not a bookstore employee anymore, I will go back to mostly used books again. Platinum Patrick asks, how has the current events of the world affected my reading? What a weird, weird time in 2020. The pandemic increased my reading because I wanted to escape. The Black Lives Matter movement stopped all reading. I wanted to engage in what was happening online, keep myself updated, support creators, donate, sign petitions. Like, I listened to so many podcasts, watched so many videos. Like, I haven't finished reading anything in June. I've started reading The Hanging of Angelique by Afua Cooper on Canada's history of slavery. I have started reading How to Be an Anti-Racist on audio, and I listen to that every morning in little chunks before I go to work. And then we have J.K. Rowling and her transphobic comments and essays, and like I have been really engaged in that. Bookbabble asks, bookmarks, yay or nay? I say yay in theory. I'm definitely someone who sticks an object in to mark my place versus like do I have a floppy book that I can do this with? You know what? I have a book that my grandmother borrowed and broke the spine. So I don't like cracking the spine. So I am not someone who puts books down on tables like this. This is a no-no. I definitely prefer object over dog-earing my place in the books, because if I don't have post-it notes, I will dog-ear. So like if I'm reading in the bathtub and I run out of post-it notes, I'll just start dog-earing the corners. But I definitely don't use like a traditional bookmark. Like I'll often leave a book with the pen in it. And oh, I hate bookmarks with tassels. It's one of those things that people gift a lot. They're like, oh, you're a bookish human, here's a bookmark. And then the bookmark has that like string with like the tassels and beads on it, and inevitably that will fall apart. You put your bookmark down and then all of a sudden there are just little strings and beads everywhere. Any of the bookmarks that I have that formerly had a tassel, I now cut them off. It's gonna fall apart anyway. We know this. I am going to end with this question, top 10 books of all time. It's a hard question. So these are books either I have reread multiple times or still sit with me. And so the first one is Miriam Toews' Swing Low, A Life. So this is semi-autobiographical, semi-fictional, playing with, working through of family trauma. Miriam Toews is a Mennonite, and this book is about her father who dies by suicide quite graphically. This book is her trying to understand and empathize with his life and his mental state. And it is beautiful, and the family dynamics here are some of my favorite things about Toews' writing, and I think the look at mental health is really interesting as well. The next book I have here is The Gunslinger, which actually is a book I hate, but the book that I really love is at the bottom of a stack of Dark Tower books, and I didn't want to dig it out. So I love the Dark Tower series, of which this is the first one. The Dark Tower series, I think, is really smart. It's really meta. It's meaty. It has a lot going on with it that will only reward me as a reader the more times I read it. So I have made the journey to the tower once, and at some point in my life I will make that journey again, and The Gunslinger is hard to get through. Once I pushed past that, the series just gets better and better, and there's more to work with. The 7th book in the Dark Tower series, The Dark Tower, is in my top 10 books. The next book I have here is Smoke It's in Your Eyes and Other Lessons from the Crematory by Caitlin Doughty. So this is a memoir about Caitlin Doughty. She is a death-positive mortician. She has a YouTube channel, and I was in a really dark place, sort of developed this really morbid curiosity, and even though I'm not in that place anymore, still really enjoy thinking about death, about my status as a future corpse, looking at different death practices, looking at people in the death industry. And this is a book that I feel like changed my life and opened me up to this macabre area of study. Did I break my own rules? I broke my own rules. This is a recent read, but it is so good that I feel like it has to be on this list. I tried to pick something with longevity, but this just stood out to me. This is Shirley Jackson's We Have Always Lived in the Castle. So Shirley Jackson is a female horror novelist, and this is a book that looks at a sisterly relationship. And again, sisters is one of those things that like checks a box for me. Mystery, family trauma, mental health all sort of fit in to this narrative, and it's fucked up. And I love it. The next book I have here does have longevity. Sticks to my rules. I have read this twice, I believe. Monkey Beach by Eden Robinson. So this is a piece of Indigenous literature set on the west coast of Canada. Lisa Marie has sort of had this dark, like wayward teenage experience. She is reflecting back on her childhood, the ways in which systemic racism and the genocidal agenda of Canada as a whole towards the Indigenous population has affected her life growing up. And so she's reflecting on this while she is waiting for news of her brother who has gone missing in a boating accident. Everything that I like is trauma. Let's continue on with the trauma and look at Falling Angels by Barbara Gowdy. So this is my first Barbara Gowdy, and it remains my favorite Barbara Gowdy again. This is Canadian literature. It is about family traumas. It's about the Field sisters and their very like military-minded father. Everything changes when their mother drops their baby brother over Niagara Falls. Something less horrible is Uprooted by Naomi Novik. So this is like the adult version of one of my childhood favorites that is on this list of top 10 books. So this is a standalone piece of fantasy literature about a young woman who is chosen by this like fancy pants wizard guy to basically be what everyone thinks is going to be his sex slave, but turns out she is going to learn magic from him because he sensed that she like has the gift of magic. The woods surrounding everything is alive and evil and always like reaching out to pollute people to take back the land, and like there's a lot going on here. The Tamora Pierce vibes are strong. I kind of love it. I love that it is the same like Dane Numair relationship vibes, but with two consenting adults. Speaking of Tamora Pierce, I have Squire, which is the third book in the Protector of the Small series. The Protector of the Small series remains my favorite. I just love Kell. I think she is probably one of Pierce's more nuanced characters. It's a perfect mix of like animals and knights and social justice. The next book I have here is Charlotte's Web by E.B. White. Now the reason this is on this list is because I hated this book. I had so much built up like rage towards this book. And then for a book club, for my in real life book club, we paired up Charlotte's Web and Animal Farm. Like, haha, they both have animals in them, and I fell in love with this book. I was able to like fully engage. First of all, like surface level, adorable text that is about love. And on like the deeper level speaks a lot to gender and veganism, animal rights. It's like there's so much going on here that I absolutely loved it. And so I'm including this on this like top 10 books of all time because I can track my journey with this book. The last book I have here is, this is going to seem silly, but it is like the absolute comfort read. I think this is the piece of young adult fiction, like recent young adult fiction, that I have read and reread over and over again, and that is Simon vs. the Homo Sapiens Agenda by Becky Abertally. It is queer, it is adorable, it is happy making, takes you on this emotional roller coaster, but like ultimately ends in like a warm, fuzzy, feely place. I definitely reread it during the like corona outbreak because I just wanted a warm hug. Becky Abertally's writing feels like a warm hug. Who's to say like when I'm 40 if it will still be on my top 10, if it still feels like a warm hug book? Right now it very much feels like a warm hug book. Those are all the questions that I have on the photo currently, and I feel like that's more than enough video. So thank you everyone for submitting your questions. I really appreciate just doing something light and fluffy and unscripted. I had a lot of fun filming this, so thank you. Please get involved, look at Black Lives Matter, look at the stuff that's happening around trans rights, the conversations around this intersectional approach to feminism versus a trans exclusionary approach to feminism. I will leave some resources in the description box down below. Thank you to my patrons who make videos like this and the long-form content possible, that heavily scripted content possible. I really appreciate their support. I appreciate that they enable me to do this work. So thank you. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. If you like these Q&As, I could definitely do more of them. I will see you soon. Bye.